All right, good morning. It's 10 a.m. We'll call our meeting to order, and it is so nice to sit around the table and look at each other face to face. Once again, we appreciate all of you making the effort to get here, and we are all here, I think, with the exception of Mr. East, who is out of town. But I'm Rosemary Altman. I'm chairman of the Mississippi Board of Education, and I'm present at the State Department of Education in the boardroom. This meeting of the Board of Education is being held today, Thursday, October 21st, 2021, via teleconference and video means pursuant to Mississippi Code annotated section 25415. Notice of this meeting was posted in accordance with state law and included the date, time, place, and purpose of the meeting and identified the location of the meeting available to the public. An audio recording is being made of the meeting, and minutes of this meeting will be recorded. The meeting is also being live streamed. Dr. Carrie Wright is present also at the State Board of Education in the boardroom, and she will participate in this teleconference meeting. We do have a quorum, and as I call your names of the board members, please, I don't have to do state. We're all here. Okay, we don't have to call the roll. All right. I have asked our two student representatives today to lead us in the pledge and the invocation. Amy Zhang is going to lead the pledge, and Micah Hill will lead our invocation. So if you would stand with me.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Lord, thank you for giving us this opportunity to be here today. I thank you for the provision you have over us and blessing us with good health. We get the privilege to not only represent ourselves, but our state. And with that, I thank you for everybody here in this room, for they have the drive and the passion to serve others and serve students in Mississippi. I pray that this meeting affects our scholars and educators positively. Thank you for allowing us to use our gifts, talents, and abilities to glorify you. I pray that this meeting goes well. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you both. Very well done. You have the minutes of the September 23rd, 2021 board meeting. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
So moved.
Dr. McGee, second. Mr. Jacobs. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we now move to the approval of the agenda. Are there any other additions or deletions to the agenda? If so, I'll entertain a motion now. Then we'll have a motion to, wait a minute, the consent agenda. Is there anything on the consent agenda you'd like to pull out for discussion? Then I'll entertain a motion
I'll
that.
make a motion that we accept the consent agenda.
As presented.
As
Okay. Ms. Werner, do we have a second?
Second.
Dr. Elam? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I keep wanting to say, raise your hand. Okay. Our next item is to adopt the full agenda as we've presented to you. Motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, good. We'll move into the report of the state superintendent, please.
All right, good morning
Morning.
and welcome. It is good to see everybody back. It's a little bit different to have a conversation when everybody's in the room versus on a Zoom call. So I'm very appreciative of your presence. Several presentations this past month. Dr. Gavin and Ms. Altman and I attended the Legislative Budget Office hearing. That's a hearing that's held annually to let them know what your priorities are as a board and the monies that we're asking for in the budget. So we'll wait and see when January hits exactly what takes place. But we did put forward the budget that you had approved, and also the priorities that you had approved. I was also asked by Chiefs for Change. I was also asked by Chiefs for Change to meet with their what they call the future chiefs. It was a lessons in leadership meeting, and it was about how do you effectively partner with the state education agency, even as local district superintendents, which a lot of these people are going to be. That's a really good question about how they can get engaged with the State Department, because we certainly appreciate them doing so. Dr. Gavin and Pete and I also met with the Legislative Black Caucus. They, too, had lots of questions around our budget, our priorities, lots of questions around early childhood. So it was a really good exchange. I had all of my advisories this past month, principals advisory meeting, my teachers advisory meeting, my superintendent's advisory meeting, and I had our first all superintendents meeting just this week, actually. We had this one virtually, but we're going to be resuming our in-person meetings the next round. The only group I haven't met with yet, which is certainly last but not least, are my student advisories. That's coming up, I believe, in November, December, one of the two. And also, we had a great tour of the University of Mississippi Medical Center's telehealth center. As you know, I've been working with the medical community this past year about how we can expand telehealth and teletherapy around the state. And it was a great visit, and we're going to see, what we can do to work with them as well. Lots of resources for you to see. One of the things that you don't, we had a slide. Is it up there, Tamala? Were you able to get the, Nathan? Just the one slide? That's right. Okay, can we do this and then the video? Okay, great. So the team has been working on lots of resources. The one that you have is you've got a couple at your table. This one, Strong Readers, Strong Leaders. This has been an amazing resource. The team just updated this. They've updated our website. This is a great resource for parents and teachers. And so we wanted to make sure that you had a copy of this. The two slides that you see up at the top, one is called Dates to Remember. That goes to the administrators. We started this about 3 years ago, I want to say, Nathan, and we felt it would be a good idea. Many of you probably use what's called a come-up file, in other words, like what's happening this month, and you pull it out to keep fresh what you need to get done, kind of like a checklist. Well, there's lots of dates that the superintendents across the state have to adhere to, whether it's a federal reporting, whether it's a state reporting, or whatever the case might be. So we've created a document for them to use on a month-by-month basis. I didn't give that one to you, but that's what it looks like. You can download it from the website. But we've got a lot of positive feedback from administrators on this, because it's a great way for them to know immediately by month what it is that they've got to do, when they've got to do it. The other resource I did give you, because I thought as new board members, you might also find this handy. It's called What Every Instructional Leader Needs to Know. And it's a lot of information about the department. It's information about who to call. So if you've got a constituent that's calling you asking a question and wanting to know who do I talk to, well, this is what you can use. It will give you the phone numbers. It'll give you the contact information. It will also give you a list of all of our initiatives. So this is something that we updated again this year. And we, once again, lots of positive feedback from superintendents and principals across the state about the usefulness of this document, because sometimes people just don't know who to call and aren't sure. So we thought you might like this to have at your fingertips as well. And our spotlight. This past year, we felt that we wanted to recognize schools that we're calling the Mississippi Emerging Science of Reading Schools. So these are schools that have trained all of their teachers in the science of reading. They have exemplified a change in instructional practices, and they embody a school culture that focuses on building skillful, strong readers in kindergarten through grade 3. We designated 7 of elementary schools as Mississippi Emerging Science of Reading schools. And the Foundation for Excellence in Education, as you well know, Jeb Bush's organization, just recently spotlighted Mississippi for its being a national leader in the science of reading. And our leadership team decided they wanted to travel to these to the inaugural Science of Reading schools to give them celebrate their accomplishment and also to present them with a banner. So what you're going to see is a bit of these celebrations, and we wanted to encourage more schools to apply to become Science of Reading schools. So if you'll show the video.
On behalf of the Mississippi Department of Education's Division of Literacy, we are excited to celebrate and recognize Faulkner Elementary School as an emerging Mississippi Science of Reading school. Come on, teachers. So we're gonna brag for a moment. Celebrate and recognize Purvis Lower Elementary School as an emerging Mississippi Science of Reading school. Congratulations.
This is super recognition because it recognizes our teachers for the hard work that they put in to prepare reading lessons and literacy for our students. It's amazing what we've been through in this last year. Our teachers are still focused on teaching and having effective practices for our students to make sure that they're identifying and making sure they're helping our students to be able to learn how to read.
It's really important that so many of our teachers are trained in such multisensory phonics type of enrichment and instruction. It helps make our community proud of where our children go to school, and it makes me really proud to be a part of this community and this school.
Are excited to celebrate and recognize Henderson Ward Stewart Elementary as an emerging Mississippi Science of Reading school. This recognition is given to schools that have trained teachers in the science of reading, exemplified a change of instructional practices, and embodied a school culture that focuses on building skillful, strong readers. Congratulations, Henderson Ward Stewart Elementary.
Through this, I feel like our teachers have really grown over the years. And so we're committed at Henderson Ward Stewart to continue growing with that science of reading model.
Look at these little faces.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Hello. Yeah, we're outside.
Celebrate and recognize Franklin Academy as an emerging Mississippi Science of Reading school.
Together we
Are excited to celebrate and recognize Magnolia Park Elementary School as an emerging Mississippi Science of Reading school.
And we will hang this proudly and continue to do the great work. But it's all because of the wonderful individuals that are sitting on that side of the wall. So thank you again for being here.
My name is Adeline. I'm in 2nd grade and I like to read. I like to read to people that don't know how to read so I can help them out.
Aww.
I don't have a favorite. I really like scary books.
Very excited to celebrate and recognize Poplarville Lower Elementary School as an emerging Mississippi Science of Reading school.
Readers are leaders.
special because it helps to really solidify the fact to the teachers that their professional development and the time and effort that they put into their trainings and things that they do in the classroom, they can have confidence that this is the right thing to do and that this is the right way to teach reading. They've seen the positive results from it.
Is excited to be here in honor of your accomplishment. East Tate Elementary School.
I am thrilled, excited, and very proud of my teachers, staff, and students. The superintendent, district office, school board, community, as well as the parents have all supported us, and we are so grateful.
We are excited about the next step in Mississippi's literacy story and the work to build future generations of strong readers.
Yeah, I know. I tell you, there's nothing like being at those celebrations. There's nothing like it. The kids are excited, everybody's excited, and I really want to hats off to Nathan's team for even thinking of this. I mean, anytime you can recognize and celebrate the good work that teachers are doing and schools are doing, I can't say enough about it, so thank you for that. Nathan, if you could just come to the table, please, for 1 second. So I want to recognize the young man that you see in front of you because this is his last meeting. Nathan's, the next journey in his life is starting November the 1st, and we wish him nothing but the best. But I could not let this time go by without thanking you for your leadership, your friendship, your vision, the hard work that you put in each and every day with your team, the family man that you are, the Christian man that you are. You lead with those values all the time, and I have just so appreciated having the opportunity to work with you. I know you're going to be missed, but the beauty of where you are is going to be that you're still connected to us because Nathan's job is going to be responsible for that liaison between K-12 and community colleges where workforce development is concerned. So Accelerate Mississippi was the new initiative of the governor and new leader there, and Nathan was blessed to be chosen as his deputy, and I know that we are going to be expecting great things from you and just so glad that we're still going to be able to see your face, but just know how much you have contributed to the work of this state and where we are. You've led, as well as your team, the literacy effort. You know, Mississippi is recognized nationally because of the efforts, and it was really started at the state, and with all the districts and teachers and leaders supporting the work. So I just want to say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart and wish you nothing but the very best. Thank you. And that concludes my report, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Just to follow what Dr. Wright has said about Dr. Oakley, probably most of you don't know is he started out as a band director. And so he has had quite the diverse journey through his career, but he brings so much energy and passion to his job. And one of the wonderful benefits of serving on this board is you cross paths and get to know people you would probably otherwise never get to meet or be involved with. And certainly Dr. Oakley is one of those people who's made a difference. And one of my mottos is, or one of my thoughts is, if you make the difference in the life of a child, you have touched the future. And Nathan has certainly touched the future with the work that he's done, and so we appreciate that. Dr. Wright also mentioned that we attended the legislative budget hearing. For those of you who haven't been to one of those, you're given 20 minutes to share your whole life and in this department. And so she did a great job, talked very fast to get it all in, but several years ago, or when she came, sort of shifted the focus of telling in these budget hearings of what the department had accomplished with the money that they had allocated to the department. Start out with that and then where we want to go. And so she did a great job with that. I don't know if it was any plan or not, but we followed the Department of Corrections. And so that was also an interesting hearing too. I learned a lot in that hearing. But anyway, she did an excellent job, and several members of the committee asked some very good questions, and she answered them very effectively. So that was one of our things on the agenda. The other thing is we've been trying, as you all know, we need to have a board retreat and to set some plans and to make certain, well, just to explain a lot of things that you are hearing about but perhaps are not fully aware of or engaged in or understand, because we do have so many new board members. However, I told Sonia the other day, this is kind of like organizing the United Nations. We can't find a date that we can get everybody here. So we are still trying, and we have made an effort to work around other work around either the day prior or the day after a board meeting, so you don't have to make 2 trips to Jackson. But I'm not sure that's going to work. So we're still working on a date. So we hope that we can work that out. Robert Hull, who is with the National School Board Association, is actually retiring this year, I think, has agreed to come and facilitate the retreat and help direct the discussion and give you a lot of information from the national scene as well as what we're doing here. So we'll keep plugging along trying to find a date for that. But when Sonia gives you sends you an email, if you'd answer those quickly so we can get this nailed down. Amy, would you like to give your report as a student representative?
Yes, ma'am. This is my first time here in this building, in this boardroom, and it's been wonderful so far.
How about taking your mask off just a second so everybody can see your whole pretty face? You can put it back on if you're not comfortable talking without it, but I just want everybody to see your face so they know exactly who you are.
Earlier this month, I was a panelist at the National Association for State Boards of Education's annual conference, where I discussed a National Academy of Sciences report about a call to action on science education. But before I get into what we discussed on the panel and what was included in the report, I'd like to share a story. Mr. Dane Piegler was my first teacher for a science AP class, and I learned AP Physics C mechanics and electricity and magnetism from him. Before him, I had no real prior experience or even an interest in science, but he was truly dedicated to helping us understand not just what AP was going to test, but also the math and the physics foundation we needed to know in order to understand more complex physics concepts. Mr. Piegler is an amazing teacher who got me interested in both science and physics, and if his name sounds familiar, it's because he was recently recognized as one of Mississippi's finalists for the Presidential Award for Excellence in Math and Science Teaching. And the thing is, I would not be as passionate about physics or even science if I didn't take his class or if I didn't get a good science education. Now that different fields are becoming more and more interdisciplinary, it's crucial that students receive a science education that not only provides them with the proper knowledge, but also engages them. But the National Academies of Sciences report found that only 1 in 4 high school seniors score proficient in science. And especially at a time where misinformation about the pandemic is so widespread, science education and science literacy are things that schools need to continue teaching to students. The report was a call for action that emphasized the importance of science education, recognized barriers to improvement, related science to other STEM fields and humanities fields, described and recommended effective approaches to improving science education, and identified areas where more information was needed. During the panel, audience members were interested in what state boards of education could do to work towards this goal. The biggest first steps that we discussed were listening to students on what would engage them, making sure that teachers were doing a good job, and following the state standards for science education, and making sure that states have a plan to increase the quality of science education and to have accountability standards. I have had the opportunity to get a great science education, and I hope that the information in the Academies of Sciences report can help other students get those same opportunities as well. Thank you.
Very good. Very well. I know you represented us very well on the panel, and that was a good experience for you. And let other people see how bright and articulate our students are. So we appreciate your efforts in that. Michael, you have your report?
Good morning. Today I'm going to be speaking on Laurel High School's College Fair that was held last week. This is a fair that is held annually, and it provides students with information about community colleges and universities in Mississippi. Having a college and career day provides students with an up-close and personal view of the different opportunities that are available to them. We were able to learn more about like Jones College, the University of Southern Mississippi, Jackson State, William Carey, and many more that they were participating in the fair. And also local industries like the Laurel Fire Department and Police Department were also there and presented during the fair. Here are some pictures about the college and career fair. So basically when you walked into the foyer, it was like a whole different type of environment. Now we have like tents there. You could go and like get pamphlets. So it was really awesome. You guys see Alcorn State. Next one, you see ACU and JSU. So this is a great opportunity for students to not only learn about schools in Mississippi, but college itself. Students were given pamphlets and brochures about how to apply for college and had people from the schools telling them more about the institution that they represent. It was held in the gym, so you guys had we had enough space to move around, and there are the students there that got the pamphlets. And the people there, I'm glad that our school actually brought people from the school, so it wasn't just like a stranger telling us about the school, but we had real people that could give us information about the college and career fair. I heard that it was great, but unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it because I'm a dual credit student and we had midterms. Yeah, this is my first time having to take midterms, and it is no joke. We were studying our butts off, cramming this stuff into our brains. It was crazy, but this experience was a good one. Some of the students had to take 2 classes, others had to take 6. I'm not 6. And we were all a part of the middle college program. Me and these wonderful groups of ladies were all a part of it, so we all get to freak out together. I will be speaking more about the middle college program as we transition to the campus itself, because right now we're taking the classes virtually. But once we, gain that full experience, I'll make sure, try to get these girls to get in the video with me and talk about how the middle college program is affecting our education. This month, our school has really been focusing on the importance of college and trying to expose us to the different opportunities regarding our education. I believe they're successful in doing so, and students are able to gain the knowledge about how to be successful in the opportunities. And speaking of opportunities, I want to give a huge shout out to the 44 students that were accepted into the Student Advisory Council. That's a huge accomplishment, being accepted from, about 100 applications. So shout out to those people, and I can't wait to hear everybody's input on how we can benefit Mississippi's education. Thank you.
Thank you. Good report. I don't know if you caught that or not, but Micah's taken 6 dual credit courses, so.
No joke, y'all.
You're drinking, as we say, drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah.
Well, I know you'll manage it. Thank you, girls. Those were very good reports. I think we have one subcommittee report, Dr. Ely.
Yes. Excuse me. Dr. Bass and Dr. McGehee and myself met with Dr. Murphy and Dr. Burson. And really, basically, we just discussed the consent items K through O, which you have on your agenda for today. And they explained everything to us. So if you have questions, we're ready to go.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. We'll move into our agenda now. Item 1 is an informational item. This is a report of the indicators of the Mississippi Statewide Accountability System for the school year. Dr. Vanderford? You're all sparkly today.
Oh, thank you. It's hard to believe that it's this time of the year again that we're discussing accountability results. However, as you know, as a result of the pandemic, our results look quite differently this year than what they have in years past as a result of the federal waiver. So what we will be presenting to you today on the accountability system is the available indicators that we are able to publicly produce based on the business rules of the Mississippi Statewide Accountability System and in accordance with the waivers that we were granted by USED. So at this time, Mr. Brewer has a brief presentation that we'll walk through. In your backup materials, you have the data that supports I'm sorry, fell out of my pocket. Supports the presentation that he's going to provide for you today. I apologize that my phone fell out of my pocket.
Just as a little bit more background information, as you know, we did not report accountability measures for the prior school year, and this year is not going to be like years prior as far as comparability, so we'll talk a little bit more about that. Also of note, these accountability measures that we're going to look at today primarily focus around proficiency. It's going to be a little different than the assessment reports that you've seen previously because accountability data is a different group of students. We're also factoring in things such as minimum enrollment requirements, also known as full academic year, senior snapshot, into the equation for accountability rules. So these will follow the trends that we saw in assessment as far as proficiency, but they won't be exactly the same. So as you know, accountability is very important in the vision and mission of our work that we do, especially in the mission of ensuring that we have accountability systems to ensure that all students are ready to compete in a global community. And accountability touches on all 6 of the strategic plan goals of the State Board of Education. So just a little more background here to talk about how we got to where we are. As you may remember, the U.S. Department of Education issued a letter in September of 2020, so the beginning of this school year that we're talking about, in regards to statewide testing, encouraging statewide testing, but signaled an openness to accountability adjustments as we progressed through the year and through the challenges that the pandemic faced schools and districts with. In October, we got additional guidance from the Federal Department of Education in regards to shifting timelines for federal identification of schools for support, so that's the federal side of accountability, and then adjusting long-term goals and measures of interim progress. The department submitted a request for waiver to the U.S. Department of Education in regard to flexibilities around assessment and accountability and reporting systems, and the MDE requested maximum flexibility in regard to those waivers. So we are holding steady with our federal accountability measures in regard to the identification of schools for supports, but we did assess, and we had a very good participation rate, as we all know. So we're reporting how accountability would have looked like based on the data that we had. So some additional notes here. These will be consistent with what we talked about with assessment results. We just have to be careful about what interpretations we make looking at this data, knowing the background of the impact of the pandemic and how this has disrupted learning opportunities, motivation on assessments, and those types of impact. So there are no new A through F letter grades that will be assigned with accountability this year. We also did not calculate a composite score for schools and districts because we don't have all of the indicators that we normally would have. The data otherwise is presented and it is calculated according to the business rules, as I mentioned, with all of those caveats of full academic year and and other filters in our student inclusion. So just as a little visual, these are the accountability components that we would normally have for districts and high schools. I have put a little slash through the ones that we can't calculate. So this is primarily, or is in fact due to the fact that we did not have assessments in the prior year. So we need a baseline assessment to calculate English language progress and growth in reading and math for students. So we don't have those indicators. The other ones that we are reporting. And then this is the accountability indicators for elementary and middle schools. So again, here we'll be reporting proficiency, but not growth. So looking at the aggregate, these are the components that we have that we're able to report at the state level. You received graduation rates earlier this year. Graduation rates are lagged, so this is a carryover from that previous report. Graduation rates did increase. Proficiency rates in the tested subject areas did decline over 2019. You'll see acceleration pretty much held the same, so students are still participating in dual credit courses, AP courses, other post-secondary credentials, and college and career readiness showed a slight decline, which would be consistent with the data that we presented to you last month from ACT. So the reports that have been provided and will be posted public today are going to be these indicators for schools and districts in the same reporting format as normal, just minus those growth components that we talked about. So do we have any questions in regards to that? Normally, I would ask you to approve accountability grades for schools and districts.
Any questions or comments on this?
One question I'm receiving from educators is what's the plan moving forward about the growth calculations for 22?
Yes, and I'm getting a lot of those questions as well.
I bet.
Yeah. So we have formed a new accountability task force that we'll be working with in order to discuss those processes for moving forward with growth. We anticipate that there's going to be an impact to growth measures similar to proficiency measures in the fact that they will likely not be comparable to prior years. And how we adjust for that is something we'll have to work with the Accountability Task Force and the Technical Advisory Committee to decide. It's certainly not going to be a decision that Dr. Vanderford or I make. We'll be involving all of our stakeholders in doing that. And I think the plan is to the best we can continue with the accountability system as we have, just knowing that there may be some adjustments that are necessary.
But the concern is not about, obviously assessing. The concern is what does it look like afterwards? Because, the incompatibility of scores going forward, the vast discrepancy of students' attendance.
Yes.
And that's a national conversation. I mean, it's.
Right. And there, like I said, there's going to be concerns even in the data that we're putting out today in regards to accountability, specifically or especially among high schools, because we did not have banked scores from the prior year to include in measures for high schools this year. So there's going to be some wonky proficiency measures that are going to be reported. And, again, we're trying our best to be as transparent as possible and to continue with consistent reporting regardless of the impact of the pandemic.
All right, any other questions on this?
One.
Okay.
So to clarify, you mentioned that we're still using this data to support like the bottom 25, or I know last meeting we identified who the bottom scorers were, and we're still, are we still moving forward?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
That goes without saying. The districts are already out there identifying the bottom 25% because those are the kids that are going to need the most help. So teachers and leaders are already in the process of doing that. The only thing that we're not able to do is to calculate growth from the last year because we did not have assessments the prior year. So now that we've had assessments last year and now again this year, that's what we're going to be working with the Accountability Task Force and our Technical Advisory Committee to say, how do we measure growth?
So in regards to how we, identify schools for
TSI and CSI, targeted and comprehensive.
are we still doing that?
We're going to be holding steady with those identifications from 2019, unfortunately. not something that we necessarily want to do, but it's something that, we received a waiver from the U.S. Department of Education to do just because we don't have the data to identify those with the processes that we have in place. Mississippi, along with many other states, have concerns about how and when do we start that re-identification process, and we're working with U.S. Department of Education to do that in the coming year, hopefully.
And Dr. Sandra Robertson oversees school improvement, and so her team and all of the folks that work with her are continuing to work with the schools that they have been working with until we get further guidance. Good question.
Okay, thank you. We'll move into item 2, which is a report on the 2021 MAP Achievement Gap results. Dr. Vanderford, you can move forward.
So for those of you that are new, this is also an annual report that we provide to the board as an informational item that we refer to as a gap analysis, where we take a look at the performance or the proficiency of each of the subgroups and report out progress. So Mr. Beer will walk through a brief presentation on this. You also received your backup material for the analysis, but many of the caveats that we've spoken to related to the data that we've produced this year as a result of the impact of the pandemic, it also applies to the gap analysis. But again, in keeping with reporting all the information that we have and being transparent with the public about the assessment results that we do have, we wanted to share this with you.
And we'll see that this analysis is reported consistently with prior years. One other, again, I'll note again that although this is going to be very similar to assessment results in regards to proficiency rates, there are some more filters in place here, additional data processing, matching assessment files, which we've reported to you, to files in MSIS. So those numbers may not be exactly the same if you compare this back to those assessment files. So, again, this is going to be touching closely with the vision and mission of the department. And I think on this slide, you'll see every. This report focuses heavily on ensuring that all and every student gets a high-quality education. So the gap analysis is going to be based on 2019 and 2021 student assessment data. So we're skipping over 2020 in ELA and math. And the analysis, as I mentioned, has some additional filters. So we're going to make sure that we have students only represented once in this analysis. So if they took, let's say, for instance, 8th grade math and algebra in the same year, we're only counting 8th grade math. So we're additional data processing and filters in here. And this is the methodology that we step through in order to identify what data we're including. So we're looking at those assessments from 2021, choosing the first assessment attempt, matching the student to the subgroup, identifying whether or not the student was proficient, and then computing the gap relative to the reference group, which I'll talk to shortly, and then comparing those to 2019. So these are our subgroups, and you'll see little check marks next to those that are the reference groups in each of the categories. So as you look through the report, you'll just need to remember that what those reference groups are, and we kind of have some shading to help with that. So a couple of things that we're going to look at is, one, the U.S. Department, or the Mississippi Department of Education has a goal in accordance with ESSA for all student subgroups to reach 70% proficiency in assessed subject areas by 2025. So we'll be reporting on that, and then we'll be reporting on that the gap to state 2025 goal for each subgroup.
For those of you that weren't around, all states had to submit a plan to the federal government for ESSA. And in that plan, we had to establish goals that we were attempting to meet and outwardly project on those goals. So one of the goals that Alan just referenced is that all students will reach proficiency by 2025, but it's broken down by subgroup. So it's not just an aggregate. It's not all students. It would be all Black students, all students with disabilities, et cetera, et cetera. So they break it down into individual subgroups.
Again, notes on interpretation here, same in regard to the impact from the pandemic. Some other things to consider when looking at this data is that there may be differences in enrollment impact among specific subgroups during the pandemic that would affect these results. And then also, you may note that you may see some things that look like gaps are closing, but we have to be careful to consider that the reference groups may have also declined in proficiency here. So those are going to affect how these results look.
That's a really good point.
So just stepping through what types of reports, we've provided you with the overall report, which is 111 pages, but it's broken down into different types of reports. So this is one where
We're sorry, your conference is ending now. Please hang up.
Okay.
It's okay, nobody's logged on to it.
Okay. It's not even lunchtime.
Okay, so this is the different district level report for each of the subgroups. And again, this information looking at 2021 gaps compared to 2019 gaps and whether or not those gaps changed. And then on the far right-hand side, the 70% goal that we just talked about in accordance with ESSA and where those student subgroups landed. So these slides are going to look at the state aggregate, and here you'll see that in English language arts, what was the gap in percent proficient for each of the subgroups, and then what was the change in that gap from 19 to 2021. Again, we're referencing back to those reference groups. So for our racial subgroups, white is going to be the reference subgroup. Again, and I'll show this in later slides, proficiency dropped among all subgroups. So our gap change from 19 to 2021 is going to be affected by the fact that that reference group also dropped. And the same information in mathematics.
This is a good time to note that footnote because it can be deceiving. So if you see the number that's in a positive manner, that means the gap widened. And if you see the negative, the sign before that means that the gap closed. But Alan's admonition was a good one because it could have been that the reference group dropped. And therefore, it may look like the gap is closing, but it could be for reasons not because the gap is really closing, but because the reference group dropped as well.
I think these next couple slides, or next few slides, are going to be more useful here because these show the gap to goal. So, for example, I'll just look at the one that's 20% white students gap to goal in 2021. It says negative 20%. You'll see in that second row, third column. So that means that the white subgroup is at 50% proficiency. They're 20% away from that 70% goal. So that's the way those read. On the far right column, this is percentage points change in gap. Another way to read this is the drop in proficiency for that subgroup from 19 to 21. So on this page, you'll see that the white subgroup had the largest drop in proficiency, 7.2% among the racial subgroups here. And this is just additional subgroups for the English language arts subject area. Some things of interest, students without disabilities dropped 7.2% proficiency relative to students with disabilities that dropped 3.2%. However, which you'll see consistent in English language arts and math, economically disadvantaged students dropped more than the not economically disadvantaged students. So this is mathematics, same subgroups. Math showed a higher decline in proficiency consistent with what we saw in assessment results and consistent with national trends during the pandemic. Okay, and then we have a heat map. So this is just visualizing these changes at the district level. So we reported on subgroup performance differences in ELA and math at the district level, and then we have also provided this district-level information for the in a heat map. So you'll see color indicators that are just indicating the amount of the gap for each of these subgroups, green being good, red being bad. So here is an example of the heat map for what it will look like for districts. And this is to help districts to look at those differences among their student subgroups. Certainly, in regard to this report this year, they'll have to consider impacts at the local level regarding how the pandemic impacted their district more than others, or specific subgroups more than others within their district.
This also gives them the opportunity, though, to really drill down by subgroup to the individual child, because there is no one fix, if you will, one intervention that's going to be the best for all white children or all students with disabilities or whatever the case might be. So when they see the color coding, they say, oh, I know that I need to focus in on students with disabilities, but then it's going to have to drill down to the individual student to know how best to meet that student's need. And that's what they've got their ESSER dollars for, too. So keep that in mind, that the ESSER money is out there for them to be able to hire tutors, to contract with different people. We've given lots of suggestions on how to help children that are really struggling.
And you may see a lot of these boxes have blanks or stars in them, asterisks. So students, if there's not at least a count of 10 students, then there's not going to be a result indicated. And in some cases, there may not be enough students for a reference group, so that those are going to be blanked out. So it's really going to be best interpreted at the district level in these reports. But we do have the state aggregate. So we're doing this for the districts, we're doing this for the state. Here's the state results for the heat map. So we can see that those in red, economically disadvantaged students with disabilities and Black or African American students have the biggest gaps in English language arts. And then in mathematics, same three subgroups. Do we have any questions?
I'll just,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'll just say I appreciated the heat map. It was my favorite thing to look at. But just the thought that I had was how we could, I was looking at how some districts, they have a lot of green. And how we can sort of, I don't know, zone in on them to see sort
learn
of
from them.
Yeah, what they're doing, to see how we can.
That's a good suggestion. We do that sometimes with individuals, but I'm wondering out loud now that the question's been asked, maybe we need to convene like a focus group of those principals from those schools that have more green to see exactly what are some of the strategies that they're using and employing. So let's make a note to do that. We might have to do it in more than one group.
Do you have any indicators about the green versus red and in-person versus virtual?
No, we don't. And I'm glad you bring that up. It's something I was going to note earlier in this presentation, and I didn't. But the department is working on some additional data analysis to understand the impact from the pandemic. We just don't have that ready yet for these reports. So, we're putting these reports out there to be consistent and transparent with these caveats to know, there are things behind the scenes we don't yet know that are impacting these, but the department is working on trying to understand that, and we'll present that information as soon as we can
Put together.
get that.
Do we have an estimate of how long it's going to take to get kids back to the level that they started at before the pandemic? I mean, do we have, or maybe we have an estimate, do we have a goal of in what year are we going to be back where we left off?
Well, that's a good question. I could probably make a lot of money if I had a good answer to that. But I think that it's really going to depend on districts identifying the right students for the right interventions. I mean, it's going to be huge for that. And that's the reason we've posted on our website those interventions for academics, those interventions for behavioral that we feel are research-based. We're putting out the high-dosage tutoring, RFP on our money so that districts can use these high-dosage tutoring vendors for either individual children or small groups of children or even children that are at home. We've put out, our whole PD plan is really, in flux right now. To be honest with you, I just met with the whole team on Monday around ELA and mathematics. And so we even went back, the team did, and hats off to Nathan's team, to identify those schools and districts that had the largest number of third graders that would have been retained had they not had the waiver. And so we are in the process now of designing a professional development for those schools in particular that have the largest number of kids that would have been retained in both ELA and mathematics. And so our strategy is going to be very different for that group. So we're trying to hone in on our end with our PD, those districts that need us the most, and because we don't have a whole lot of people to spread, so we need to focus on the districts and schools that are really struggling. So we are recommending that districts are really monitoring their data on a regular basis. I know all districts use benchmark data, but it's going to be even more important because some of these kids have really fallen behind. And the numbers on some of those districts are alarming about the number of children that would have been retained. So now that the waivers are no longer, we're now in a year that when these children, if they aren't able to pass this assessment at level 3 or higher, and without good cause exemption, they are going to end up being retained. So that's going to mean a very different model for an elementary school that may not have as many fourth graders moving on and may have to move fourth grade teachers down into third grade because that may be where the bulk of the kids are. Well, if we're now looking to train, what do we need to provide our fourth grade teachers to know and be able to do if they are teaching children that are significantly below grade level or are moved to work with those kids. So we're not leaving anything off the table right now. We've got a lot of initiatives heading, as Alan said, in the background, in a lot of different directions, but we're using the data to drive our decision-making and our resources as well. I wish I had an absolute answer, because some kids, it may take not much, right? It may just take that individual attention, a lot more attention in literacy and math than it had been before, and others may end up struggling a little bit more, particularly if they were not engaged in learning, even if they were virtual or even if they were hybrid, it may take them a little bit longer. So it's something that I know our teachers and our leaders are working on as we speak.
Another question.
Wendy, would you agree with that? How your school is using their data?
Yes, ma'am. We're just trying to identify, and we have new tutoring going on, after-school tutoring, and I'm in the English department, so we have another year that we won't have any data to compare that to because the children taking the 10th grade assessment this year don't have the 8th grade test from 2020, and that'll be a lot of algebra students as well. So you don't have the 8th grade data, but we are using other assessments, but to get benchmark assessments to see where we are and what we can focus on and how to close those gaps.
That's
but
perfect.
When you're out of school for that length of time, and some people didn't have the technology or internet to, the pandemic really put all the students back a great deal.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned after school, because that's one of the things that we have been encouraging districts to use their ESSER dollars for, is after school programming and summer school programming. Because it surprised me, to be honest with you, when I found out that some districts were not offering any summer school programming last summer. So that impacts, progress. So we're hoping that more districts will be offering summer school programming or Saturday programming or before school programming. There's a lot of different ways to go about it. So I'm glad to hear that you guys are doing that.
We provide transportation. So we have buses that bring them home on Thursday, and they get a snack. And a lot of times, if they have a bad, we do like the reteach, retest. So it encourages students also, if you failed this test, you can come, make up the time, come back and reteach it, and then you can average the 2 grades. So it motivates them to want to get the tutoring as well. So
That's
I have a
perfect.
question. The students, well, the school districts, does the state provide them with specific programs to help them, like specifically like the school districts? Does the
We
state
make
provide them?
recommendations. We've got a lot of our different, what we call approved lists. So the team here kind of curates, and vets some of these programs. And so the ones that we recommend, we feel confident in recommending, but we can't make a district use any of those.
Right.
So we can do what we could do on our end, but then it's up to the district as to whether they purchase the interventions or they take the suggestions or use the guidance documents. But it's our job to make sure that they've got the resources that they need in their hands, and then it's on them for them to do it. And so you can see what Wendy's saying at her school, they've already jumped on it and they're running after-school programming and incentivizing really high school kids to really retake exams if they can. So there's a lot of ideas out there, which, gets back to, Dr. Bass's question about finding these best practices. So I've made a note for us, and let's see how we might go about doing that. And we might want to do it like in 3 different focus groups, like an elementary, middle, and high, so that we've got different aspects of that. But we'll take a look at that and bring that back to you.
Do you have another question?
I have 2 more.
Okay.
One thing that caught my attention when you were explaining what was going on with trying to help schools. Do the ESSER, and this is probably a naive question, but do the ESSER dollars, do you MDE, get ESSER dollars? I mean, I know
Correct.
the schools do, but you do too.
Correct.
And then can those dollars not be used to hire, you say you only have so many people, so many hands to be out there? Not those dollars, or do you have to get a pen from the legislature?
So we can't hire anybody we don't have a PIN for. So let's be clear on that. But what we can do is hire contract people, and so that's one thing that we've done with the money, even with our digital learning coaches. They're contractual people because we did not have PINs. We've been encouraging the districts to do the same thing, to go contractually, because if you hire, the districts aren't in the same position we're in, so they can hire people, but there's a funding cliff. And eventually the funds aren't going to be there. So we're not encouraging them to hire permanent people, meaning you've got the job forever, but to hire people contractually so that they know that they can stay within the confines of their budgets. But that's a very legitimate use of that. We've encouraged them to use their high school students to tutor and pay the high school students a tutoring fee, which is a perfectly good excuse for that money. And so high school students can go down into high schools or middle schools or elementary schools and be working individually and get paid while they're doing it. So we've offered lots of suggestions. It's just really up to each individual district as to how they want to go about tackling the problem. Yeah.
Okay, and then my second question is, are there federal government accountability measurements or whatever associated with ESSER dollars? So we're going to have to prove ourselves.
Oh, where's Dr. Gavin? Yeah. Dr. Gavin could probably talk from now till next Thursday about all the accountability. There is so much accountability and so much paperwork with all of these dollars, and the districts have to submit for reimbursement, and it's got to be an allowable expense. So they need to be very careful that they're purchasing what's allowable, because if they don't and they've already purchased it, then they own it and have to figure out another way to pay for it. So the feds are very, very strict, and we've got a lean team down there. Dr. Gavin can tell you, but that is some of the way that we're using some of our contractual money is to hire contractual workers to help Dr. Gavin's team, because you can imagine from 900 some odd schools and 150 districts all submitting paperwork up to a very small team that's got to go through it line by line. We needed more capacity. So, and that was a legitimate use of our money as well. So we've been, even the money that we're using, we've been trying to respond. My student advisory last year, for example, was talking a lot about social emotional wellness and how children were really struggling with that. And so a good portion of our money that we've got is going to provide training for teachers to work with students around social emotional well-being. So we've been trying to be responsive to what we're hearing from the field, and then also what we're learning from the data to drive our spending. And that I did present to the Legislative Budget Office hearing when I was there as well. So they asked to know, what are you spending your money on? And so we gave them an overview of how we're spending our money. And part of part of the money is there's also requirements. There's requirements of the department, and there's requirements, and Dr. Gavin, if I misspeak, you speak up. There's requirements of the department and the districts and the schools that part of that money must be spent on learning loss, must be spent on additional time for children to learn. So it's not just, here's all the money, go forth. It's, here's the money, but you need to reserve this for this, and this for this, and this for this, per the feds. And then the rest of those funds then are under their purview.
Well, I understand, I previously understood we had to account for the excuse me, the dollars spent. But
It's allergy season. I've been doing it all the time. Yeah.
what I meant by accountability, I meant, I know the Fed's expectation is we'll see improvements, but do we have to reach a particular level of improvement because we took the dollars?
No.
They're
There's
not
no
making- They're not making
no.
accountability on progress made based upon dollars.
That's their hope, but they're not going to say to us, well, we expect you to gain 5 percentage points and you've only gained 2, give us 3% of your money back. Yeah, no, they won't do that. They've never done that before. Felicia, would you agree with that statement?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Dr. Wright, with the, you were talking about peer tutoring. We have started that this year, and it's going really well. We're doing a breakfast club, and so they can go to the library, and if they're struggling with a certain area, we have students in there that, and the kids are really, really enjoying it. So they're,
That's fantastic.
They're going
That's
before
fantastic.
school each morning. It's called the breakfast club, and I'm really shocked at all the people taking advantage of
That's
it. All the
awesome.
students.
That's awesome. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and that student to student is very successful in most cases. It's not intimidating, and they relate to each other well. So, but Dr. Elam and I were thinking alike. If you were a fortune teller, about how long it's going to take us to pull out of this, because I was thinking as you were doing your presentation that you would, it's going to take more than 1 year to pull out of this, or 2 years. This is going to be a multi-year project. And the thing that I think the general population doesn't always take into consideration is how many different languages we now have spoken in our school and schools, and the language gaps that we have. So you add that to not being face-to-face in school, and that further exacerbates the learning gap. I know Mr. East and I were talking, he has 27 different dialects spoken in his school. Well, I mean, that's hard to, in a good situation, that's hard to overcome, and you throw in what we've dealt with. Teachers have done a fabulous job in doing what they can do during these difficult times, but we're going to have a challenge for several years yet, I think, to close this gap and get us back where we were. Go ahead.
It brings to mind another question, not directly related to what our subject matter is, but are we going to track the number of migrant children that come into the schools?
Yeah, that's part
And
of what
its
our
impact?
federal programs they have to track. They have to track migrants, they have to track homeless, they've got to track military students. I mean, there's a whole list of students that they've got to track.
But it seems like that's going to play into the gap.
It will.
measurement.
Big time.
Play very heavily.
Well, and I always use DeSoto as just a glowing example. DeSoto owns almost all of the English language learners in the state. They've got, I want to say, between 1,500 and 1,700 English language learners in DeSoto, and here's DeSoto as an A school, A district. And so they've really embraced those children and have done an amazing, because that whole component, I mean, everybody was very fearful, I think, when the EL component was added, but by the feds, and surprisingly so, our EL kids have really done well. But to Rosemary's point, these are also the kids that are going to continue to struggle. And so that's a group that we really need to be paying very close attention to her point, because you can imagine sitting in a classroom and not knowing English and trying to learn a content. So, And that's one of the reasons that the team has put together some resources for general ed teachers, because we do not have enough EL teachers across the state. We simply don't. And so that's going to fall to the general ed teacher to know how to work with these EL students. And we put together a beautiful, huge guidance document for teachers who are working with English language learners. It gives them lesson plans, it gives them activities, it gives them resources, it gives them information about how they can work with the parents, and the parents can work with the children. So we've tried to give our general ed teachers as much information as we can, and that resource is on our website if any teachers are listening and don't have it. But it's a great resource. In fact, we gave it to CCSSO, and they made sure that all the states in the nation knew about it. So we really very proud of the work of the team that put that together.
Dr. McGee?
Have we seen the return of our population and our student population gone up this year?
It's not gone back to where it was, but nationally, we're being asked that question even across the street. We've been declining in enrollment over the years. Mississippi is the only SREB state that has continued to decline in overall population and even in our enrollment. Our enrollment has dropped. I want to say, Nathan, we just put about 5,000 students per year, would you say? Ballpark, 5 to 10. But that's been happening even before the pandemic hit. So if you recall, last fall, we had about 23,000 less students. And so we sent the school attendance officers across the state to locate all children, because we wanted to make sure that they were in a learning environment. And so they did an amazing job. We located all but about 300 of those students. And we saw more kindergartners were kept at home. And of course, they're allowed to do that because we do not have a mandatory kindergarten attendance law. And we saw a real spike in homeschool because of a lot of parents that chose to keep their kids in homeschool. But there were kids that ended up in private school. That's one of our codes. So we have got codes that we had to look for and then place them in those codes to identify. So we felt we did a really good job, where that was concerned as a state. And I know that there's the same thing was being done this year with the school attendance officers because we've also got new leadership there. And so I think there's been a lot of effort to really make sure that that's being done the same this year as it was last year.
Not necessarily people leaving Mississippi, they're just leaving public schools.
The population of the state is declining as well. So there are people leaving Mississippi. The student enrollment is declining, and we can, if we know where they're headed, or the school attendance officer can identify that, or parents may come in and say, we're moving, or whatever the case is. But that has also been dropping, but it was dropping before the pandemic. That's what I'm saying. So there are children that are.
Both issues.
It's both issues. Right now, we're facing both issues. That's a good question.
Which will lead into a financial issue for the districts.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Which is the reason we have been asking to move from ADA to ADM, because right now, the average daily attendance is part of the formula, and that is a dipstick in time. It's one day that they come in and say, we're calculating your ADA. However, if you hit in flu season, then, as no pun intended, but, there could be a lot of kids out. Well, you just lost all those kids. But if you go to ADM, average daily membership, you still have to be responsible for all of it, because the very next day, those 300 kids that were absent on one day could show up the next day because they finally got well, right? And we have been arguing that point for, I can't tell you how many years across the street, that we need to be looking at average daily membership and not ADA, because these districts particularly are going to take a hit if it's ADA.
Why do they not want to change?
I couldn't tell you that.
Well, the other issue.
Solve the issue then.
This came up during the budget hearing.
Yeah, it did.
Is about MAEP and fully funding MAEP. And there's a lot of, I would say, misconception out there about what's included in MAEP. It's not just how many students you have, but it also, as Dr. Gavin explained very well, it includes a lot of your operational cost and benefits
Add-ons.
and add-ons and heating and cooling and all that kind of thing that's included in the MAEP that I don't think a lot of people understand. They just assume if you have X number of students and it costs this much for you to educate that child, then that's all you should get. But there are a lot of other add-ons that are included that, like Dr. McGee says, is going to come home to roost at some point, and it's going to be a difficult situation for school districts.
Do you know if the increase of students leaving Mississippi increased because of the pandemic? I know they were leaving before, but do you think after COVID hit, they started?
I would have to get that number, Micah. I don't know. I know by the number of kids we coded in that code, that out-of-state code, I could get that number for you out of the 23,000, because we have that every year.
Okay.
We've got to make sure that the October 1 date, John, am I right about that? October 1? Yeah, that we take the official count of everybody that's in school. I mean, I know schools start in August, but we give them until October the 1st before we take an official count. But we can certainly get you that information.
All right, any other questions or comments on that? All right, thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, item 3, these are action items. Dr. Gavin, if you want to come forward and take us through the contracts.
Yes, good morning. We have 4 contracts presenting to you today. 3 of the action items are modifications to existing contracts, and then 1 item is a renewal of a contract. The first item that we're presenting for your approval is the modification for the interim superintendent for the Tunica County School District. That is extending Dr. Pulley's contract through June of 2022.
Okay, we're going to take these all under one motion, so
Okay.
if you want to move forward, unless there are comments about this.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
That's part of our discussion that we're going through right now.
When they.
Okay.
From underneath the district of
Yeah.
transformation. That's part of a conversation that's taking place.
I mean, you all are discussing internally as to
Yes,
when they will.
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
It's not time to ask that question.
That information will come to you for sure.
All right.
Action item 3B is a modification with the North Mississippi Education Consortium. And the purpose of this mod is to increase funds. We're actually using some of our extra dollars here to support districts through professional development. Item 3C is to renew our contract with the National Center for the Improvement of Educational Assessment, and this is to help facilitate and manage our TAC group. And then the last contract is item 3D, and it's a modification with the North Mississippi Education Consortium. And this is to support our MDE digital learning program also, and these are also federal funds from ESSER.
Okay. Any questions on any of these contracts?
What is the North Mississippi Education Consortium? What is that?
Dr. Gavin?
It is actually in statute. They actually support that. We have 5, I believe, is it 5 regions, 6 regions?
That was my next question.
Yes, around the state, correct.
You'll hear the term RESA being used, Regional Education Service. That's what it is.
Okay.
Agency, thank you.
And they serve as, as the fiscal agent for these regions.
I'm learning here still.
Yeah. Is this the one that's out?
I don't know where this is.
All right, I didn't remember. All right, any other questions or comments on these contracts? Okay, then I'll entertain a motion that we approve items 3A, B, C, and D.
So moved.
Okay, we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, all right, let's then move to item 4.
And for the next item, I'm going to recuse myself and per the ethics requirements.
Okay. All right, Dr. Gavin.
Okay, action item 4A is a modification to the Early Learning Collaborative Council grants, and we're actually increasing those among our 7 existing collaboratives to increase the number of children that we're serving over this 3-year grant.
Any questions or comments on this one? Okay, do we have a motion to approve item 4A?
So moved.
Okay, we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Somebody will get Dr. Bass back in as we move to the consent agenda. Okay, on item 5 is the consent agenda. We have items A through R. There was nothing that was pulled out, but do you have any questions or comments on anything you'd like to? Okay. Do we have a motion to present approve the consent agenda items A through Q is what I have, R, I'm sorry, yeah, R. R is informational. Yeah, it is informational.
Oh,
Q,
sorry.
Q, A through Q. We have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Okay. A second? Dr. Barrett, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Then we have item R, which is an informational report. Dr. Vanderford, is this you? Report on the action of the Commission on School Accreditation?
I think it was just the report was included in the back.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
I
it's
didn't know
just
she had
information.
anything
No.
else to add.
Just information.
I saw that puzzled look over
Yeah.
your mask. I was just making sure you were awake back there.
She was, you woke her up with that one. Good, I put in my notes, no consent agenda item, we're going to the thing.
Okay.
I have a quick question.
Sure, go ahead.
Just because I don't, and it says process with no public comment. Does that mean it was presented to the public and they didn't make a comment?
That's exactly
Right.
what that
Okay.
means. So anytime you see that when things have gone out for APA, you will see either it says with public comment or with no public comment. And so if it's with public comment and there's no substantive change, then we're good to go. If there's with comment that we feel there is going to be substantive change, then we have to make those changes, send it back out to APA, and then bring it back to you again. So you can rest assured that these are cleared either with public comment, meaning, yep, we agree with what you're getting ready to do, or without public comment, meaning nobody sent anything in. Does that help?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, good.
I have a question, and if this is not the right spot to say it, tell me to shut up and
Well,
I'll
that's
ask
okay.
it later.
Say it.
I know that the temporary rule that we have passed and then extended for hybrid learning expires on October 30th, I believe, or 31st. Has there been any requests or anybody saying, hey, we need to extend that?
I've heard maybe from one superintendent.
Okay.
But I've not heard from anybody other than that one superintendent.
And the reason I was asking, because I know that would expire before our next board meeting, so we'd end up possibly having a gap, but if there hasn't
No.
been anything.
And we know that, and I think we said this, at least I hope we did, the last time, if God forbid, the pandemic hits again in winter, then we may have to come back and revisit that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That's a good question,
That
though,
is a good
because,
question.
Well, let me
That would
follow
be-
up on that. With the governor's extension of the order, would that not kind of mirror that?
I don't
Governor
know.
extended the state
Joe?
of emergency to into November, didn't he?
Joe?
well, you're the lawyer. You get out.
Yeah.
I was going to give my opinion,
Yeah.
but since you're the lawyer, go ahead.
So,
Oh, and Paula just let me know, we did not get any public comments on that. Thank you.
So
Thanks,
it's
Paula.
my understanding, as far as the extension of the state of emergency, that what the governor did was just not enter an order ending the current state of emergency. So it's running now through mid-November. As that relates to the order, what the board did going through October 29, I'll ask a question. Was that that was in conjunction with the governor's state of emergency permitting the hybrid schedule?
I think we did it, and to be honest, I mean, I'll
it
speak
was
for
tied
myself.
in with those
It was
dates.
tied in with that, but we didn't specifically say that. I think we saw the numbers going up.
Right.
And we were hearing from a lot of folks that we need an option here because we're sending all these kids home. And so that's the reason we brought it to you as a temporary rule.
So
But we
it's
did
not-
not get I'm sorry, Joe, we did
No, I'm
not get
sorry.
public comment otherwise from that.
So it's not locked in, I'm sorry.
A number of districts would like that opportunity, but they're not sure. Because like what Matt said, it's gonna be in October, but since the governor extended it, because comments were made, supposedly, I didn't read it, but heard from some people that the governor's extension would also help the employees from their issues.
That's correct.
Pay, and so would that not cover that?
It would continue to allow for the administrative leave.
That's
for-
correct.
And for certain employees. So going back to what the board previously approved that would run through October 29th, was that done and stated that that's to run in conjunction with and because of the state of emergency? I'm deferring to my attorney, Aaron, here.
No, it was, I don't recall it being
It was
referenced
really a
with that.
response to the
Yeah.
superintendent's request.
Yeah.
It wasn't response to the governor's.
Okay, so it's not locked in together then, it appears, based upon what this board voted to do back on October 29, it wouldn't automatically be extended just based upon, it's certainly something to consider that the governor has allowed for the state of emergency to continue on through mid-November.
Well, I am hearing from educators that it appears that our numbers are going down tremendously across the state and are not nearly dealing with as much as they were previously. But there was a confusion about that governor's extension, about what does that really mean. So we probably should send out at least communication to them that the hybrid situation does, at the end of October. the way I'm hearing.
It's not automatically extended by the
That's right.
state of emergency extension. Yes, sir.
We can put that in the update.
Yeah, and this is going to continue to be a fluid
It is.
situation
It is.
for a while. So, if we have to make some other decision, we can do it
I do
by a
think it's.
special call on Zoom
Yeah,
or
and I do
something.
think it's significant that we got no public comment. We got nobody writing in saying, make it longer. So I think if we just keep our options open, if COVID gets worse, then we can always revisit it. Thank you.
Okay.
Sir?
Good question. Okay, now we will move into a consideration of executive session. Do we have a motion that we consider executive session?
So moved.
Well, we have all this mumbo jumbo we have to read first.
Oh, okay.
Now, that's how I used to do it, but this is different.
Picture me as Mr. East.
Lean back and do this.
I move that the board consider making a closed determination of the need to go into executive session.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Well, the mics are back on, but is the stream's on too? Okay. The board has voted unanimously to go into executive session in accordance with Mississippi Code annotated Section 254174A and K to discuss discrete personnel matters related to the approval of appointments to certain positions within the Department of Education. Also, in accordance with Mississippi Code annotated Section 254174B to discuss strategy sessions or negotiations with respect to prospective litigation, or issuance of an appealable order involving the MDE.
teaching her classes at William & Cleary. And I think she's working with Arkansas on a project. She's going to continue to do it. She's really excited about it. She won't be here. No. She couldn't be anyway because of her retirement. You're only allowed to work 50%.
Okay, during the executive session, the board approved the appointment of Education Bureau Director 2 to serve as a engagement office, director with the Office of Technology and Strategic Services. That person is Amy Marquez, and we look forward to having her to work with Mr. Kramer in his office. That was all of the action that was taken during the executive session. Do we have a report on any meetings that any board member has attended? Or anybody need approval to attend a meeting out of state? Well, our next board meeting will be in November. It will be on Friday, November the 12th, 2021, in this room in the Central High School building. We will begin at 10 a.m. as usual. Having no other business, I'll entertain a motion that we adjourn. We have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay. A move and a second over here. So all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much.